Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today our question comes to us from Afterfauve. And Afterfauve has a question which, though not asked as a follow-up to our earlier vlog on the nature of universal and personal deity, is a very suitable question to follow it with. And the question is this. Afterfauve begins by reminding us that in his personal practice, he uses certain fictional archetypes as his deity figures, one of which is James Bond. But he points out that James Bond has been portrayed in a number of different ways and by different actors, such as, for example, Sean Connery, Roger Moore, etc. And his question is, how would you treat this kind of variation on the theme of a deity? And does this occur in classical paganism? And my answer to this is that I would regard these as aspects of the deity. And I would say that yes, it very much occurs in classical paganism as well as traditional Christianity and pretty much all religions at some level. If you look, for example, at the many different forms of the Egyptian god Horus, or at some of the different forms of the Greek god Zeus, or even the goddess Venus, as she appears in the story of Cupid and Psyche versus how she appears in most other mythology, you will see that ancient pagan deities often had different aspects that could be very, very different from what we commonly think of them as. And people were certainly aware of that at the time, and they treated them generally as different aspects. The way a particular deity was worshipped in one place and conceived and portrayed in that place could be very different from how they were worshipped, conceived, and portrayed in another place. But this was not, for the most part, a problem for people. They regarded it as different ways of approaching that deity, as different aspects of that deity, and I think that's a very practical way to do it. And if you look at historical Christianity, for example, you will notice that its major deity figures, such as Jesus and Mary, have many different aspects that in some cases are very different from one another. The sweet, mild Jesus with the lamb on his shoulders is not the same Jesus sitting in judgment on the last day in Christian mythology. It's a different aspect of the same God, but very different in how it's looked at and portrayed. Mother Mary had many different forms. The standard form of Mary that most people would think of is not quite the same as her form as the Black Madonna, for example. And she was the patroness of many different things, and in those different roles was often portrayed and conceived as acting very differently for that particular purpose. An aspect of the deity, if you would, although her Christian followers certainly didn't think of it that way, but that's basically what it is. So when we talk about deities, personal deities, as being aspects of universal deity, they can have multiple aspects of their own, and this is not uncommon historically. So that's what I would say when you have a deity that has a number of variations, such as for Afterfauve, James Bond and his different incarnations, and more undoubtedly to come. What you're doing is you're approaching deity through different aspects. And I would say that this is both very traditional and very practical. So those would be my thoughts on the matter. I hope you find them helpful, and until next time, may you blessed be.
Universal deity. The different faces of deity are ways of understanding universal deity. All of the faces of deity, in the end, reflect the same universal power, as in fact do we humans and all of the rest of creation. That universal power is infinite and beyond our power to know in its totality. So we make understandable images through which we may interface with it. That infinite power is universal deity, the spirit of deity that is beyond all names and images.